All right, here we go. Another have Tiger Verdun coming back on the podcast. We have an extraordinary story for everybody here at the True Brew Bobcast at the end of Dayton Road at Cafe Dayton. And Tiger, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
You
having
know, it
me.
was kind of funny. He came on initially to tell us about this story, and we just got off on a whole other different conversation. So
That's how conversations and coffee work, man.
that's how it works. Good coffee.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's talk about this extraordinary story. Let's start off in say 1940. All right, and let's kind of build your character up a little bit. What was this guy's name? What was he doing? What do you know about his early life? Let's start with that.
Not much about the early life. So we'll start in 19 early 1940s. The world is thrown into chaos by the German regime, by Adolf Hitler, and World War II begins. At that time, I don't think anybody on the planet would have thought the severity of what was happening in Germany, or in the border of Germany and France and Belgium and Poland and Austria, and all this was about to happen, that World War II was about to take place.
The world was much bigger back then.
Yeah, and although slower, a lot more complex, unfortunately. And again, the last podcast we talked about politics, we talked about race, we talked about oppression, we talked about pretty much everything, slavery, and now here we are talking about World War II, one of the worst wars that our country has faced, to date, and um, but unsung heroes, rose out of that.
Okay, so here we are. Think the story probably starts off in little small town Baldwin,
Franklin.
Franklin. Okay, small town Franklin. This is the early 1940s. Just to kind of parallel that picture behind you is my grandfather, who came from Hope, Arkansas, to actually help build the Baldwin Bridge.
Oh wow.
Met my grandma, Cecile Barrow, uh, which was living in Baldwin at the time, and he was there to build the Baldwin Bridge. Meets the little Cajun girl, falls in love, and gets married. Uh, my grandmother gets pregnant, and he's off to war. And she was pregnant from my mother,
Yeah.
Sherry Wilson. And so I'm staring at this picture, and you about to tell this story of a guy who was my grandfather's age.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. Of course, we'll talk about Edward Vincent Loustalot, born and raised in Franklin, Louisiana. I'm still doing the research on his life. I know the story from the Army forward.
Okay.
Now I'm researching his life, his early life, shall I say, in Franklin. I'm from Franklin, and the way that this story's come to me as a playwright, to be able to tell his story, and not just his story, but 50 other brave soldiers that were Americans, and many others, Canadians, British, Belgium. I mean, you name it. How it came to me is a whole nother story in itself, but we're going to tell it in a little bit. But I think, when you look at the world stage at that time, um, time was a lot simpler. The factories were really, it's after the Dust Bowl and Depression, and
Industrial Revolution is
it's
coming, blew through, and
coming
it's
through,
happening.
and then chaos happens. Adolf Hitler and a couple of the other figures that team up,
Mussolini and
Mussolini, and
Japan
yeah,
and everybody's acting up.
you Pearl Harbor, and the world is thrown into chaos, but then the brave stand up. That forgotten generation of today, are the greatest generation of our history's times. They've gone through things that we can hope and pray that we never have to see or do in our lifetime, or our children or our children's children. Um, Although there are conflicts, there remain conflicts in the world. Um, but I think the wars of yesterday, those guys, it was horrible. But so I'm gonna start you from the beginning of where I start
Let's do it.
in with this. So, uh, sometime in 2019, I'm the public relations director for the city of Franklin, and we were contacted by Miss Diane Boudier, who is actually an American from Michigan, now living in France, looking for Franklin, Louisiana, that Edward Loustalot, Second Lieutenant Edward Loustalot, Army Ranger, First Battalion, grew up in.
So you
And
received a phone call. You were working for the city of Franklin,
mhm.
and this woman gets you on the phone.
Well, she gets the mayor's assistant on the phone, and she tells this story. And with the French inflection on the Loustalot name, in Franklin we say Loustalot. In France, they say Loustalot. And when you say that with a very thick French accent, it doesn't even sound like Loustalot.
Like
So
I heard of Luce a lot before, but if you would have said Lucelo, I said I never heard that in my life. So
yeah,
that's kind of where Franklin was.
that's right. So we know the family, of course. However, when she's telling the story, Tammy, who is I believe related, she's related to the family. She doesn't she doesn't recognize the last name that this lady's telling her over the phone. So I can hear her from my office saying, "No, ma'am, no, ma'am, that doesn't sound familiar. I'm sorry." But then she goes, "Hold on, let me let you talk to Tiger." So she transferred this call to me, and when she tells me, I said, "No, ma'am, I've never heard of the family name." But she was saying Loustalot, and it was so thick and heavy French, with a French accent, that I didn't recognize the name. And she proceeds to tell me his story, and that this city, Berneval-le-Grand, France, has been looking for the family for 80 years now, almost 80 years, since the end of World War II. And she tells me the story, and I'm just blown away by the story. And I'm like, I really wish I could help you, but the last name doesn't sound familiar. And she's like, okay, well, it was worth a try. And she's again, this is Franklin, Louisiana, in Louisiana, right? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. I said, I don't think there's a Franklin ton, which we get
Right.
confused with. So I said, but before you go, how do you spell that last name?
There you go. That was a great
And I
question.
spell it out, and
You
we're
knew right
halfway
away.
through, and I go, wait, no, yes, you have the right city. Yes, we say Loustalot. We say Loustalot is not. We don't say Loustalot. And I'm like, you have the right city. I know the family. Well, she gets excited. I'm excited. I'm waving frantically at Tammy to tell her to come in. She does it. She comes in, and she says, so this was toward the end of October, I believe, of 2019. The city of Franklin was going to celebrate its bicentennial in 2020. So 200 years of history that we wanted to celebrate. So I invite her. We had stuff planned every month. And I said, look, would you and your husband fly to the States, fly to Louisiana, and come tell this story? And I will introduce you to the family. We will have the family members there. Without hesitation, she says, absolutely. So in January of 2020, Diane Boudier and Patrick Uber fly to Louisiana. We at the Tesh Theater for the Performing Arts, we host it, and she proceeds to give us a 3 hour
Wow.
PowerPoint presentation,
Wow.
including family lineage to the village of where the family founded.
Wow.
And
She's talking about the village that wants to recognize Mr. Luce a lot.
so no, so actually, it's the village of where the Loustalot family came from.
Okay.
So, and that his grandfather founded, was one of the founders of this small little village in France. Well, so fast forward a little bit when she's telling us the story. So, Second Lieutenant Edward Loustalot uh, joined the army, became a second lieutenant, and all of a sudden in the mess hall, they see this flyer that's just posted on the wall. Do you have what it takes to be a U.S. Ranger? To be the elite of the elite of the Army?
Hmm.
It's almost like an audition.
Yeah.
So, what happened in World War II, the they had the British commandos. They were like the world's elite force.
Right.
So the Americans said, "We've had the Rangers before, but we want to bring them back." They started the Rangers back in 1776. Let's bring them back for World War II. So they take these group of Americans. They were already in Ireland,
Hmm.
getting ready to acclimate their bodies to the
Hmm.
weather. They pretty much, I don't want to say audition, but they literally have to fight for their lives to be the top of the top. They literally bring them by bus to Carrickfergus, Ireland, to these barracks that they have already
And
created.
this is after basic training and all that stuff.
Yes,
This
yes.
is we're going to take this cut of these soldiers and turn them into rangers.
Well, we're gonna find the top of the tops of these soldiers, and they're gonna be our elite crew. Our
And so
elite fighting force.
get the stories dates down. This is pre D Day. This
This
is
is
we're getting
So
ready
you're
for the
in.
invasion.
That's right. You're in about the 19. Right now you're in 1941 ish, almost in 1942, early 1942, and they take these guys by bus and they drop them off in Carrickfergus, Ireland, and they show them a map. All they do is show them a map, and they said, "You have 15 minutes
To get to here.
to get to this location.
All right.
Study this map, get to this location." So 15, of course, these guys are running. You know, the before 15 minutes, as soon as they start showing up, find a bunk, find a bunk, find a bunk, find a bunk. 15 minutes happens. Like next 15 minute with 1 second, get on the bus, get on the bus, get on the
You
bus,
out
get
there.
on the bus. You're back in the
Right.
regular army. Those top guys, 50 Rangers, they take those top guys and they train in the most amazing conditions, live fire, live weaponry, real weaponry. And I had the opportunity to go do my research in all of these areas. So I went to Carrickfergus, Ireland this summer. I went to Dieppe,
So
France.
they're all well documented.
All they have more museums about the Rangers probably over there than we
Then
do
we
here.
would ever.
Um, the one thing that stood out was we train for reality, not for safety.
Mm-hmm.
And there are photos of their training, of where they're training with real knives. The main thing was that they made them put their rucksack on with their weapon, climb this log ladder, and jump off at about 2 stories into the mud. Whoever didn't hurt themselves moved on. If you were injured, you went back to the regular army. I mean, that's how strenuous of the training that they went through. So they get a call up. It's called Operation Rudder. So they don't really know the operation. They know that there's going to the beaches of Dieppe. Dieppe was one of the very rich towns. It was a casino town. It was a fishing
And the
port.
Marines were in the Pacific, so they had
That's
to go
right.
Army and the Rangers.
That's right. So they had all this aerial reconnaissance of all the beaches along Dieppe. This is still part of Normandy, but a different part of Normandy than the D-Day beaches. So these are the beaches like within 7 miles of Dieppe. Um, so Operation Rudder is gonna happen, and all of a sudden Operation Rudder gets called off. So these guys are just now just stuck in Carrickfergus, Ireland.
And Rudder's was what operation was that supposed to be?
It was taking the port of Dieppe at that time.
So that was going to be the initial invasion.
The initial invasion. So there's a the historians have said that this was supposed to be the first run to see the
Reaction.
Nazi defenses, to test the Nazi defenses. So what happens? So you had many people involved. I mean, you had everybody from the Scottish regime. You had the I mean, you name it, they were a part of it. The Canadians. This was a major, heavily major Canadian role
And they were
as
all in
well.
a training camp together.
No, just the Americans. But they did train together. So they trained with the British commandos to learn their style. So all of a sudden, 2 months later, of course, these guys are into Irish life now. You know, this town took these 50 Americans and made them their own. You know, they were like, we're going to take care of them. Of course, the young ladies were out and
Hmm.
about. This is an ancient city that has a castle. You know, it has a medieval wall around the city, right down the street from Belfast, where the Titanic was built. So a lot of
So why were
history,
they holding them in Ireland?
getting them acclimated to the weather. They wanted them cold, they wanted them rainy, they wanted them to be able to be in the worst conditions before
Hmm.
invading France or Germany. Um, so they go from there, and then all of a sudden it's wait, 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 wait. These guys are getting aggravated. These guys are getting to the point where, they're just living a normal life in Ireland. They're still training, but they have a lot of downtime. And they're ready to fight. These guys were trained to fight. These guys were trained to
Let's get
create
it. Yeah.
chaos, and let's get it done. Well, all of a sudden, August 19th, 1942, Operation Rudder was changed to Operation Jubilee. So this was to take the beaches of Dieppe and within a 7 mile radius.
And so here's the English Channel. Is Dieppe
Mm-hmm.
that skinny part? Is that
Dieppe, it's so France comes out, kind of gives a little hook. It's right in that little,
which?
yeah, I'm
That's
gonna
where
say
they were
cavern.
anticipating them trying to come, right?
That's exactly.
Okay, the shortest distance.
So
This is where they come.
when you go there on the ground, you see how heavily fortified it was. I mean, the Germans built bunkers. I mean, they built it in neighborhoods as well, and very close to nice neighborhoods, hoping that the Americans wouldn't bomb. That was the thing. So, I mean, and people were still living in these neighborhoods, and they did that purposefully. Um, so the morning of August 19th, 1942 at 5 a.m., all of these guys will split into their battalions. The Rangers will split with the number three commandos, the British commandos, and they were going. So everybody had their of what they were gonna do. Okay, um, I mean, some were going to take out machine gun nests, some were going to take out radar, some were going to try to capture the town, some were trying to go up the port to capture the
Hmm.
port. Well, when this happens, it happens very fast. So now I'm going to focus on Edward Loustalot and,
Okay.
and, and his company.
He's part of this 50
He's
group.
part of this 50 group. They split the 50 group between the two. Edward's part of with the British commandos. These were the baddest of the bad of the military at the time. And when I say bad, I don't mean horrible. I mean,
They
like,
were
these were the top elite
right.
fighting forces. And he was the second lieutenant. He was right under the British captain. So he's number 2 in command.
Okay.
Okay, they're in these personnel carriers going toward the beach. If you look at, so when we think of D-Day beaches or whatever, they're flat. They're completely flat and sandy. They didn't take into account of the elevation of these beaches.
Hmm.
They couldn't tell because they were capturing aerials, and at that time it was
You
just
couldn't tell the
the
elevation.
elevation. This had an elevation. of upwards of 15, 20 feet at very deep slopes and full of pebbles and rocks. So
So they're
immediately,
going. They hit the beach. They going up.
but it's chalk cliffs. So when they're coming onto the beach,
Is this like the White Cliffs of Dover kind of cliffs?
yes,
Yeah.
like very large cliffs. So Barneval-le-Grand, France, is where Edward Loustalot and the Rangers and the Number Three Commandos were going to land. When they start landing, so there's some information that's just now being declassified that kind of changes this story a little bit. That I don't have all of the information now. It's a possibility of they weren't just testing the defenses. There was an Enigma machine that was coming into the port of Dieppe, and Edward, so the British commandos and the Army Rangers were going to intercept this boat
Mm.
to capture that Enigma machine. So I don't have all the information on that yet. We're still working to get through some of that information. So,
But the plot
but the
thickens.
plot thickens, it does. So at about 5 a.m. in the morning, they're on their way. It's a foggy morning. Thankfully for them. So they
Two
kind of
two
have a little bit of
groups.
cover.
Two
No,
groups.
it's many groups.
Okay.
So I think at right off the top of my head, I want to say it's about 6 or 7 groups, 7 miles, apart. Within a 7 mile stretch, all headed toward
And they're
the
not in
coast
these
of France.
Higgin boats. They're in a different kind of boat.
They were similar, so they're very similar. Um, had tanks inside, um, but not the Churchill. It was different types of tanks. So the thing about it, when you come into the these massive cliffs, I mean they're massive. They look small when you're far away. The water at low tide goes out for just almost a mile.
Hmm.
So you can hit beach running.
You got to run a mile.
However, of course, the tide was up when they came in, so they were able to get in close. Well, they start taking mortar fire. They start taking a lot of fire early on. They get into a skirmish with a couple of the boats that were leading. If there was gunboats leading this other boat, well, the British captain, gets killed in a mortar attack. So immediately, Edward Loustalot, second lieutenant, takes command
Mm.
of this battalion. In true Ranger fashion, he calms himself from the attack and he takes charge. He proceeds to tell them, and we have firsthand accounts of the guys that were with him, that he's told them, gentlemen, Rangers lead the way. That's the Ranger call. Rangers lead the way, and as soon he tells them, follow me. Immediately, of course, they're taking so much shell fire. When they get up to the cliffs, there's two valleys. So immediately at that time, so imagine this: the largest dogfight in World War II history is happening above their
Right
head.
here. Right.
So if you can imagine being shot at by a couple of hundred machine guns with mortars, with tank fire, and the largest dogfight happening, it's very loud. They get to the cliffs, the valleys have razor wire, everything to deter them from taking that route. So they literally have to scale these cliffs to get on this hill, on the side of a hill, which is below where they knew machine gun nests were. So he takes the lead. He climbs it. The guys are following him. They're using their bayonets once they get on the hill to keep themselves up on the hill. And unfortunately, so he gets shot 3 times. He's still moving, and
So he makes it to the top of the hill.
makes it to it's a very long hill. So the top of the cliff,
And you actually climbed the
I
hill.
climbed the hill. Yeah. And I'm thankful that they pushed me to, because of course it's very steep, and I had no safety equipment. I didn't have a bayonet. I made it up halfway. I placed the rows where they feel his body was, and coming down, I definitely slid down the slope. And thank God it was easy then because it's landscaped and everything
So
else.
the French knew the story intimately. They
Yes,
brought you to, you feel, the exact spot.
the exact spot.
Wow.
So what happened, and we'll get into how they know that. Um, of course, so two other Americans, and many others died that day. They retreated because it was too much. They knew the Germans were so dug in and ready for this fight. It was overwhelming. The Canadian losses, because this was a heavily Canadian battle with more Canadian troops, the loss of Canadian life was astronomical. Um, all of a sudden, so Edward Loustalot was given he's given the I don't want to say honor, but he's listed as the first American to die on Nazi occupied soil during World War II because of where his body was. The other two Americans made it a little further in. So now all of this it, it- it's it's listed as a disastrous raid in World War II history. Okay.
But it was clearly the first official raid.
The first official attempt.
And then so he made it to the beach. He made it to the cliff. And by the French accounts, after their investigation, their forensic on this,
Hmm.
they said he had to be the first one down
Because of where his body
because his
was.
body was. And the other ones who died advanced a little more,
A little bit more.
which makes sense.
Yes. So we get to that part of the story now. So what happens? He of course his body's there. There was a lot of propaganda from the Nazi army. So the Nazis during that time they had lockdowns on the cities. The pretty much the citizens took care of the Nazi regime, of everything from food to clothing, housing. They would just take over houses, cows. I mean, whatever they wanted, they took. So the people of Barnaval Le Grand, of course, they were told you can't go by the beach. The beach is off limits,
Hmm.
you know. So they never did. Well, they stayed inside their homes when all of this was going on. So the Americans, what happened? They were supposed to, the Air Force was supposed to come over and clear all of the machine gun nests. Well, unfortunately, they met resistance with
The other five
yeah,
Spitfires or whatever.
exactly. So um, now after the retreat, the bodies are left there. The bodies are left in August. Now it's not Louisiana sun, but it's still summer for 2 days. 2 days just in the sun. The mayor of Barnaval le Grand, France, at the time, then tells the German officer, the top German officer there, that sir, disease is bad for you as well as us. You need to let us bury these bodies. So they agreed. So that's how they know approximately why he was the first, and where his body
So
was approximately.
they had the wherewithal to
Document.
document the scene, and so I presume they got his dog tag, so they knew who it
They knew who he
was, and they
was.
documented that.
So what they did, the people of Barnaval-le-Grand were tasked to move the bodies into the church, but don't bury them.
Hmm.
So that's what they did. They moved the bodies to the church, left it there. Lockdown happens. During lockdown, of course, the Nazi regime they eat and everything else. Well, that's kind of a time where the people of Barnaval-le-Grand, France,
Hmm.
sneak out,
Hmm.
go to the church,
Hmm.
and they bury the the Americans' bodies.
How many bodies were there? I wonder.
I'm not too sure on that. So what they do first, they adorn the bodies with flowers. They cover them, and they adorn their bodies with flowers. Then they go home. So the next day, the Germans see this. They call everybody out. They tell them these were invaders that were coming to invade you all.
Mm-hmm.
We were saving you from them.
Mm-hmm.
The propaganda machine. This is pretty much happening throughout that seven
Right.
mile stretch of beach. Only one of the operations worked, and but they all seven of the beaches needed to work for them to take
Now,
this
what
stretch.
month was this?
This was in August of 1942.
But D-Day was in June. It was June, so D-Day didn't come for another 8 months later,
Yeah, yeah,
or 10
yeah.
months later.
10 months. So what happened? We're sitting there. That they're sitting there. Go on lockdown again. So they're pretty much punished. Okay, you go on lockdown. Okay, all of a sudden the Nazis take the bodies and they go bury them in an undisclosed location.
Mm-hmm.
So during that night, the people of Barnevald-le-Grand go and adorn the graves of these fallen soldiers.
Mm.
So the next day, when the German officer sees this, he immediately I need to let Hitler know this.
Really?
So they tell Hitler what this town has done.
They didn't like they were sympathizing on the
That's right,
Americans to
because
come.
the propaganda machine was these are invaders. We're your friends. We, you know. So all of a sudden, it gets to the point where um, so they decide, okay, you know what? Let's turn everybody against each other. So they go to Dieppe, okay, which is a very rich port in northern France. They said, we want you to say that you helped us thwart this attack of these invaders coming in. We'll give
French,
you
other Frenchmen.
other Frenchmen. We'll give you all of this money. Well, Dieppe said, we don't need your money. We have our own money. They well, what do you want? They said, well, we have POWs that you took from here. Okay. So Hitler orders the release of all of the POWs in that area except Barnevald-le-Grand, France,
Really?
because they were sympathizers. So, of course, a little while D-Day, the same U.S. Rangers, the same infantries that went through came through again on D-Day.
Different story this time.
Different story this time, and they came back through these towns. So, unfortunately, when after World War II, Edward's body was exhumed, and he was buried with everyone else. So they thought he was a Canadian at first because he had no more markings on him, but they all kind of wore the same uniforms. Um, then when they finally, so he was buried there. When they found out that he was American, they exhumed his body and buried him in the American cemetery in Belgium. So, well, again, then they say, oh, when they find out where he's at, they ask the family, do you want to bring him to Arlington? And at that time, the family's like, no, he's been, let him rest in peace. So, 3 Americans died during that operation, unfortunately. Um, so the Americans, the Remembering Americans in Europe Foundation, actually helped bring me over and help, you know, kind of
So
start the
they
process.
knew the story 80 years ago,
They
or
knew the story,
78,
so
5 years ago. So they knew it. They knew Edward Loustalot.
yeah,
They knew he was from Franklin. They knew the story. they solidified and made sure that it was documented properly.
and they celebrated him every year since the end of World War II.
Really. So every year the town celebrates this guy that they can't find out where
That's
he
right.
lives and from.
Exactly.
And he's right there in Franklin, Louisiana.
Exactly.
Oh, blows
He
my mind.
has a road named after him. He has plaques with the other American soldiers as well, and all soldiers throughout the city.
How big of a town?
It's a small. It's a very
Like a Franklin sized town or bigger?
um. So Barnaval is probably a little bit smaller, but very rich. That whole town is. I mean, that whole area is
Wealthy.
really wealthy. I don't want to
But
say
man, I think
complete
that's
wealth.
awesome that they still,
Yeah,
celebrate how do they view it? Did they view that
they view it better than we do.
we freed them?
Yes, definite. The pride I had going there and seeing this just throughout France is you don't get that sense here in the United States. They look up to us. They still thank us. I went to commemorations during this time, and it's hard to put into words. I'm never at a loss for words, but it's hard to put into words on how they feel of us. And you always hear that the French don't like Americans, and that's not true. They love Americans, especially when you get to the older French people that just take you in. I had a lot of time at a lot of these commemorations. Sometimes I know broken French, of course, growing up in Franklin. My dad spoke French, but our our parents weren't allowed to speak French,
Right.
so that culture never
Hmm.
came on to us.
Now, what did you find out about the Loustalot family? Like, did they remember? Did they
What they knew, yeah, but they didn't know that he was being celebrated every year. Um,
I
I,
wonder what the War Department told them. They had to tell him that he died
that's
in action, right?
yeah, they definitely they knew he died in action. But that was it. Nobody knew that he was being celebrated every year until I think the 78th commemoration, so 78 years and or 79.
Did he have brothers or sisters or
Yeah,
anybody?
yeah, and
But he wasn't
how?
married. He didn't have
No,
children.
no, yeah. So, and the thing is, they even have so the church that they were originally the bodies were brought to is no longer there. It was bombed out. They just did major bombings of that whole area. Um, they have a grotto that's still in the space, and there's a large placard. I mean,
Hmm.
that's probably 8 feet tall,
Now,
with
did
his
they
name
keep
on it.
the German bunkers and everything
The
to
German bunkers are
so
still
you was
there.
able to walk in there?
Well, not walk in because they're all closed in. So everything,
But it was
some of
heavily
it
fortified.
was heavily
A lot of
fortified,
concrete, cement.
concrete. I mean, it's to see it and go, man, they were
So
ready.
you
They were
stood on the
ready.
bunker
I
and you
st-
looked over the beach.
yes, I stood on the
And
beach.
you
I
you
walked. I
saw
walked the
you
beach.
saw the view of the German.
I saw the view of the German, and I also saw the view of Edward and the American or the soldiers coming to free
So it was
that
real
area.
easy to visualize what happened.
Yeah, and
And somebody
feel
from the bunker got him, you think?
it was from a machine gun nest that the way it's hard to explain with the cliffs. The cliffs were straight face
I
cliffs.
think he was telling me it kind of like had a little.
So it, to
It was a
come
trap.
up, yeah, it was definitely a trap. So to come up on the beach, so coming from the beach itself, there are cliffs, but there's a valley. There's two valleys that you can walk up, and that was all booby trapped and razor wired or barbed wired at the time. So they had to scale the cliffs to a point to where they can get on the hill, which was sideways. So all of this is fortified where they can't pass. So they climb up here and they start working their way across the hill. And on the top of the hill, you still have machine gunners up there,
Got it.
and that's what they did. They got about halfway through. Like I said, he got injured 3 times because they had machine gunners down that valley, and then the other machine gunners on
So
top just
that
came over.
initial mission that they were killed on, um, was it a failed mission? Did they retreat and get out of there?
Yeah, that so they call it a disastrous mission. They don't really call it a failed mission because the information they gained really was the blueprint for D-Day. They realized these beaches weren't the right beaches. Also had the opportunity to run. The beach there was a little different because it went all the way up to the cliffs. The beaches around there had a chance to run it, and
So
it's
they
all
shoved them
pebble.
down to Juneau and the rest of them.
Yes, that's right.
They said, okay.
They were like, you need to go more west, where it's more sandy beaches, not rocks. Because even the beaches that the tanks were able to get on, they just dug themselves into these pebbles. I mean, yet pebbles of different sizes, and they're slick pebbles.
You was able to walk down there?
I was able to walk. There's still evidence. You can, one of the beaches at, I think it's Varangeville, you can still see the bullet holes in the rocks. Everything. I mean, you have rust colored holes in the inside of the pebbles that you can see. There's, I mean, it's just you. The craziness of the beauty of the area, knowing that there was so much chaos and death of the area as well. It's very heavy. There's not a lot of um, there's beach activity at some of the beaches, and some of the other beaches that doesn't really have a beach head to it. It's more of just going up to the cliffs. It's just very calm and serene. So, there are poppies that still grow naturally on the beach. Um, the area is just it's
Yes.
beautiful, and just to so eh, when I was first tasked to write the story, when Diane Boudier came, the mayor of Bonneval-le-Grand made me an honorary citizen
Really?
of Bonneval-le-Grand, France. So
Beautiful.
that's the medallion that you're looking at. So on a Friday night, they meet with me, who he's kind of now the parish president or the senator. So they have a different.
Is that the Ranger Patch?
We'll get to that one.
Okay.
So um, I get to meet with the mayor and the current mayor, and the gentleman is now like the senator who made me the honorary citizen, a Friday night at City Hall in Barneveld-le-Grand, France, and um, they were translating for me, and it was just a full circle moment, because also hanging in City Hall is the flag that was given to her, given to the city of Barneval by our mayor, with the proclamation and a letter from our mayor. So, kind of a full circle moment on something that I've been working on. Every year on August 19th, we do a dual international flag raising ceremony together via Zoom and Skype. Um, so we do that together as two communities, two international communities, which is amazing. So now let's. I also had the opportunity to go to Carrickfergus, Ireland, that same time. I went
Where
with
they did the training?
where they did the training. So um,
How'd y'all get there? A flight?
we're a flight. We quick flight. It's called EasyJet. So you look at the jet and you go, okay, let's hope this thing makes it there. But a quick little flight over. I did a lot of stuff. I didn't just focus on. They treated me very well. I was there 2 weeks, and it wasn't just all World War II. Anything that was touristy, they brought me to it. When we went to Ireland, first thing they did was take me to Giant's Causeway, which is one of the seventh wonders of the world. Just beautiful, amazing. They took us to Belfast. I went tour the area of the Troubles, between Protestants and Catholics, and that's a whole nother podcast. But while I'm in Ireland, so we were going for the 81st commemoration of the U.S. Rangers beginning in Carrickfergus, Ireland,
Mm.
and so that was a major celebration at the time. So people representing the crown was there, the mayors, all of the dignitary of that region
Celebrating the U.S. Rangers?
celebrating the U.S. Rangers,
Wow, that's
including
amazing.
the current First Battalion U.S. Rangers that came.
What, they're all way, way up there and mostly dead by now. Was there anyone there?
That was well, no, I'm talking about the current Rangers.
Oh, the
I'm talking
current
about
Rangers.
the active duty Rangers of that battalion were there in uniform and participated in the commemoration.
Nice.
And so that's what these patches are. When a Ranger appreciates you, they give you their patch off of
Well, that was
themselves.
special.
And I was able to. Uh, I
Wow.
had three Rangers give me three
Wow.
patches. So
Wow.
um, you know, that's something that was real touching for me because they felt that I was honorary of receiving their badge, and um, spent a lot of time with them. Did some touristy things with them as well. Of course, talked to them about their training. Of course, the training of today is different than the training of
Sure.
yesterday, but still has its
Oh, yeah.
foundation. You know, and these guys are amazing. They're very kind. They're very thoughtful, but you can tell you don't want to mess with them.
You know, and I was just too young to really appreciate it. Um, my grandfather was like the picture shows. He was in World War II in the Pacific, but he was a big study on the European corridor.
Hmm.
And so in 1984,
Hmm.
um, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer and taking treatment.
Hmm.
And this is Ronald Reagan.
Hmm.
I'm in college. I'm 20 years old. And uh, we decided, me and my girlfriend at the time decided, hey, we're going to fly to Europe
Hmm.
for the summer. And I asked my grandfather to come along. Hey, man, you want to come? Well, he did. He comes in and he flies over there. He's losing his hair.
Yeah.
And we were able to, one of the things we were able to do is cross the English Channel in a hovercraft.
Hmm.
And coming back, he saw it and knew it and spoke of it. And so we went through Germany and those kind of things. But so that was special for me. And it was actually the 40th, 84, so it was 40th year anniversary
Hmm.
of VJ Day or D Day or
Hmm.
whatever. So it was emotional for him. He's
Yeah.
40 years past that, and but I think of my grandfather, Paul Wilson. I think of Dick McCloskey, our coach that
Hmm.
was over there. He was in World War II. Mr. Nolan Hebert, I knew really, really well. He was shot down twice. He loved the French. They saved him. The
Yeah.
French underground saved him
Yeah.
twice.
I have a whole nother story on that too.
Okay, cool. Mr. Frank Polita, I heard all the stories I heard. He was a badass.
Yeah.
Like he was, and I'm trying to remember. I guess the VHW halls or whatever, but those guys really wasn't looking to be celebrated. I mean,
No.
we could have had parades for these guys, and you're talking about Mr. Ed. You know, even the fallen ones. So I know that's just the ones that I know of from being told as a child. There was probably gobs of them in that area
Yeah.
who quietly got yanked from the countryside and thrown into a world war, saves the world, and comes back and tries to live a normal life. And man, that was some tough dudes, bro. That was just some tough guys, you know.
I look at, my grandfather was in World War II, and then he was right at the end, so he didn't actually fight. The war ended before he did. But my wife's, grandfather, and would never speak about it. He would not talk to anybody. I mean, he's never told his son stories or anything, and he would just tell them, "I've seen and done things no man should ever have to see and do."
Hmm.
And he left it like that. And one day, I caught him on a good day. We were staying at her mom's house, and they all live on that same property, And one morning, I just caught him, and it was a good day. And he started telling me stories of paratrooping into France, and had never told anybody else that, And this is, I mean, years before this even came up, and I wish I would have recorded him at the time, because we're losing these stories. And you know, there's a line in the musical Hamilton that says, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?" Because everybody has a story. All of us in here, we have a story. Will somebody capture our story before we die? You know, and if they do, who will live to tell our story? So we're talking 80 years later, for Edward Loustalot, that I will tell this story through his eyes, through the families that I had the pleasure of meeting, of the other Rangers that are no longer with us, but listening through them, listening through stories that they were told, listening through stories that the museums. I went to 4 Ranger museums in that area. Three, three of them are at Carrickfergus, Ireland.
Hmm.
You know,
And
two.
through the eyes of the French people too. I mean, think about it. If they weren't freed, the trajectory of their lives
Or
was a whole nother history
yeah.
story. One of the things my grandpa said on that trip that I've carried since that conversation
Hmm.
40 years ago. Um, he said, um, everybody talks this patriotism, and that's real um, Hollywood, is the way he described it. He said, we were young kids, and he says, we were there to save each other's ass.
Hmm.
That was it.
Yeah.
We were strictly there to survive. And he was speaking of the Japanese just being fierce,
Hmm.
fanatical soldiers.
Hmm.
He said, you don't think about anything but surviving every day.
That's right.
And the, the, so in other words, one play at a time. You're not worried about winning. You worried about surviving that day. And I think most of them were like that, and they let the historians write what they want. These guys, I think, that returned home had a lot of guilt with the ones who didn't, but they also, I'm speaking for my grandpa, sort of,
Yeah.
from what he articulated to me, was he was just glad to had gotten an opportunity to live a life.
Yeah.
And so, look, man, those guys can't be praised enough, and their humility and the way they carry themselves. You know, them getting the label of the greatest generation, I don't think is, I think is rightfully earned.
Oh,
So,
definite.
so,
Yeah.
so you're writing a play about this. You're a storyteller. You're a historian. You representing Franklin and the people of it. This is a phenomenal story of this soldier who had a untimely death, but I'm glad you were able to. I'm glad you took the phone call. I'm glad you
Yes.
told him to write the name down.
Yeah.
It might have slipped through our fingers forever if you hadn't have done that. So I don't know what made you ask that question, but I'm glad you did.
God.
Yeah, and able to tell this story and remind us all that freedom's not free, and a lot was sacrificed, and I hope we all appreciate that. I know I do, and I
Yeah, I
hope
do
to
as
keep
well.
telling the stories for our children there. So, what do you hope? What do you hope to do with this story? How would you like for Franklin to to recognize not only this soldier but that generation? What's in the works there?
So, well, Franklin does have a historical marker, and that's on Edward Loustalot as the first American.
Where's the marker?
It's by the Peace Memorial in Eastwood, and
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know, but there's only so much you can put on a plaque,
yeah.
and growing up, seeing that plaque, it really doesn't tell the story. It just gives who he was and that he was the first to die in World War II, first American. But it doesn't tell the story of Operation Jubilee. It doesn't tell the story of the French people, of what they went through at that time. And it doesn't tell the story of the lives he touched
Mm-hmm.
as second lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
The friends, the British commando friends he made.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story of, you know, toward the end of his life, a British commando soldier that he befriended drove across the channel under the tunnel, and I mean by ferry, and literally went to went to thought he was still buried, went to pay his final respects because he knew that was going to be the last time that he would be able to drive there.
Why is this story so important?
With Edward's story, or
Edward's story.
well, I think again, we when you tell the story, not only do you capture the history, but you hope that history isn't repeated in this sense, you know. But it also keeps what he did alive, his bravery. Um, I think again, everybody has a story.
Where are you on your screenplay with it?
Well, it's going to be a script, so it's going to be a play script right now. Right now, I definitely my outline is completed, and I've started filling that in. But I'm working on his early life. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of the people that grew up with him are no longer with us as well. Some of his family members have letters that they received from him. So that's what I'm doing at this time. About to put my hands on those to get a sense of who he was and how he was, to be able to bring him back to life on the stage. This is going to be a stage play. Um, I would love to. I do want to have three premieres. I want to have a Franklin premiere. I want to have a Louisiana premiere, and I want to have a Dieppe premiere uh,
What's a Dieppe premiere?
in Dieppe,
Oh,
France.
Dieppe, France.
Yeah,
Okay, nice.
and of course, Carrickfergus, Ireland. We've been having conversations as well. It would be a little easier there because they speak English there, where Dieppe, it's mostly French, but most of the French people there
What are
speak
you
English.
thinking? It's going to be through the eyes of who the play? Who is going to be the storyteller in the play?
Oh, definitely. Edward's going to be the storyteller up into his death. I know how I want to start it. I'll probably start it present day, and then we'll go back in time. And
You ever considered you being the storyteller in it?
possibly, I am an actor, so I may
But I mean,
play Edward.
I mean, the way it unfolded, not only are you an actor and you're doing the screenwrite, but I think from your perspective of discovery and telling the story uh, is fascinating because you can really describe all the areas. That's just me thinking out loud. But
Yeah.
what a great hey! Thank you for not only representing South Louisiana and Franklin, but uh, having enough interest to pull it all together and all the parties to come together to tell this story. I'm moved by it because, you know, time just drifts things away, from all of our memories. I remember the smells of my grandpa and the Camel cigarettes he smoked and the things he
Coffee
did,
and
the coffee he drank, the black coffee, and again, I was too young to understand what he did, and here I am, an older man, and um, just the importance of it gets bigger and bigger the older we get.
but
So,
I wrote another play called Undying Love about 9/11, which follows a husband and wife working in the World Trade Center on 9/11.
mm,
And after I perform the plays, I have talkbacks with the audience because I like to know, I want their input right then and there. Like, don't,
mm-hmm.
I have thick skin. So if you didn't like it, tell me you don't like it. If you loved it, tell me you loved it. But what am I missing? That's my main thing. What am I missing? And somebody in the audience said, there's like, this is a rough play. It's a tragedy. Why would you write this to? And I said, because I don't want people to forget. And the woman told me, she goes, how could anyone ever forget about 9/11? And I told her, name me one person that died in Pearl Harbor.
You say that. You know what that brings up? Like, it's what generation are you in? How do you do it? And so, the definition of, say, a baby boomer is from 44 to 64. Well, I'm 1963, so you officially a baby boomer. No, I'm not. I'm an X.
Yeah,
I'm an X. That's what I relate to.
yeah,
You say, well, what makes that determination? I said, because I don't remember John F. Kennedy being assassinated.
hmm,
But if you was 5 years old in 1963 or older,
you do.
everybody can tell you exactly where they was at when they
That's right.
found out. And so I didn't have to go through that trial. I don't know what that even. I don't remember any of it. Wasn't even born yet. But same way with World War II, whatever the older people get,
Hmm.
and it's just. I think it's important to preserve it, to tell the stories, to let their lives do that. So, hey, thank you, because I know it's important to our generation, and hopefully our kids will listen to stuff like this and know the importance of that as well.
Exactly.
Any final thoughts or anything on this thing right here?
Man, just, we just need to, I think the major thing that we can do, I never served in the military. Anytime you see somebody, whether in uniform or out, thank them for their service. I know a lot of these guys say, I don't do that for thanks, and I don't like when people thank me, because I was doing my job. But I think a thank you goes a long way sometimes.
Hmm.
I do a lot of volunteerism, and people that stop and purposefully tell me thank you certain times, that stands out in my brain
Hmm.
more often than not.
Yeah, no, true there. How can people follow you, Tiger?
I'm on social media, so Facebook, Instagram. That's really the only two I have. It's Ed Tiger Verdun, and everybody knows me as Tiger. So,
And so when the play comes out, and if you have any information or whatnot, they if they following you along, they'll
oh
get
yeah,
it.
yeah, that and much more. So everything we do at the Tesh Theater, everything do throughout the city and the area, the region, as well as the state. I have other projects in the works as well. So yeah,
Well, thank you, World War II vets, the fallen, and the ones who came back and helped our communities. Thanks to Ed Loustalot, the first American soldier who died on the beaches of France. And thank you, Tiger, for going over there and getting all the details and sharing it with us, coming on the podcast, sharing the story with us. Uh, and heck, you want to come do another podcast one day?
I can talk your ear off, man. I have so many stories, so many stories, and now so many World War II stories, from
Yeah.
literally going there and seeing it,
We went, it was Veterans Day last weekend, and we went, Dr. East is over
the
the
Bayou region.
museum, and we went by. And if anybody gets a chance to go do that, that was a very touching museum over there. Did a great job for it being a small museum,
Yeah,
but they covered all the wars. It covered,
that's amazing.
it's amazing. And so there was a lot of veterans there, and uh, artisans there, and sort of it was just a great day. So um, anyway, thank you, and let's get together soon.
All right,
All
thank
right,
you.
Tiger. All right,
Appreciate it.
brother. Yes, sir.
Thank you, man.
All right, that's a wrap.